Okay, Brandon Mosley back here with Chris Peaks for our BCS State of All podcast. So we got Case Dixon back here with us, who is running for the GOP nomination for the 6th Congressional District again against Gary Palmer. So, Case, I got a tough question before I start off with you, man.
Yeah, man. What's up?
So, all right, so don't think I'm putting you on the spot or being, hard on you, but in May, you face Congressman Palmer.
Sure.
And after running a long time, long campaign, and the voters chose him by a large margin. What leads you to believe that you're going to be able to switch these voters 30, 35% to vote for you on August 11th?
Sure. I think there's several reasons. I mean, I think number one, we already saw, and this doesn't mean that I'm hoping for a low voter turnout, but I think that anybody that's running for office wants an informed electorate. That's what you hope for, because I tell everybody, I can live with if comes down to it and people know who I am and they still vote for my opponent, that's fine with me. I can live with that. What I don't like seeing is folks that maybe hadn't even found out about the campaign yet, and then so they went with the name ID. And who's to say that's what happened on May 19th? But there was a lot of races going on. I mean, a ton. I mean, we're talking obvious. I mean, clean slate across the board: Secretary of State, Auditor, Lieutenant Governor, Governor, Senate. I mean, you go down the list. And so anyone that's challenging an incumbent, I think already faces an uphill battle in that regard because a lot of people are focusing on the open seats. But then also, it's no secret that there's fundraising discrepancies. And then whenever you've got someone that's a 14-year incumbent, it's hard on an election year where there's a lot of open seats and things like that. So what I'm hoping to see differently on August 11th is think about it. If you're in the 6th district and you show up to the polls on August 11th, you're going, and I'm hoping that you know both candidates because there's only going to be two candidates on your entire ballot. So if you're in Shelby County and you say, I'm going to vote today, today's August 11th, today's the day I'm going to vote. You show up, there's one race. And so I'm hopeful that if you are someone that goes out to the polls on this random, unusual day, that you've at least researched both candidates. And I think that there's a lot higher likelihood that's going to have happened on August 11th than what happened on May 19th because there were so many other races people were showing up for, not just for one race.
Case on we just had the Republican primary runoff. There was only the two of y'all in your race, so you weren't actually on the runoff. But only 10.3% of Alabama voters participated in the Democrat and Republican primaries. The Democrats are a little bit worse than the Republicans, but I mean, what? Maybe like 3.5% of the state voted in the Democrat primary, and maybe 7.5 or so in the Republican primary. Given that a lot of people are still on vacation on August 11th, and school is just starting for a lot of families, so they're having to buy hundreds of dollars worth of school supplies and new clothes and everything. Um, are you concerned that we're going to have a really, really low turnout here on August 11th with just one race on the
Yeah.
ballot?
Yeah, I mean, to kind of circle back, I do think that that is the facts. I think that we are going to see an extremely low voter turnout. I would like to see a large voter turnout, but once again, I want an informed electorate. And so typically, just the way things are going to skew, the folks that show up on August 11th, they're going to be the more involved, the knowledgeable voters, the ones that are actually paying attention. And I think because that's the case, I do think we're going to see a lower voter turnout. I mean, we got sliced in half going from May 19th, we had, I think, 20 something percent voter turnout, 22%, down to 10% on the runoffs. So I wouldn't be surprised if we only saw like a 5% voter turnout. And if we're talking 5%, I mean, I got 14,000 votes on the 19th. I think whoever gets 10,000 plus one, in my opinion, is going to win this election. And so obviously, all the 14,000 people that voted for me, not all of them are going to show up again. But I do think that that brings about a unique set of circumstances where whoever can get their supporters to the polls is going to win because I don't think you're going to have the voter that just goes, oh, today's voting day, I'm just going to the polls. I think it's going to be the people that are going with intention. And there are people that are supporting me and there's people that are supporting Palmer. So it's just a matter of who can get their people out there.
Actually, I do agree with you that this is going to be very low. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it was lower than 5%. I mean, even 2.5 or 3. And I think in a race like that, that gives you a lot better chance of winning in other cases. Is there a way, or have your campaign looked at how to identify who your voters were in that primary and to get them back out to the polls? Because like you
Yeah.
said, 10,000 votes may win this race.
Well, I mean, it's a secret ballot, so we don't really know who voted for Case and who voted for Gary. But if the party releases the data, you can see who actually voted.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we can't see who voted for who, obviously, but we can see who voted on the 19th. And even more importantly, in my opinion, we can see who voted in the runoffs. And, I'm not giving away any trade secrets here. It's no surprise that if you vote in the runoff, you're probably more likely to vote in the August 11th date than someone that voted on the 19th and did not vote in the runoffs.
You made waves earlier in the campaign when Trump invaded or not invade, bombed Iran and we started the Iran war. You took a stance in opposition to the presidential executive authority on the war. Now that we've fought this for 3 or 4 months and we're sort of in the winding down negotiation stage, we think, do you regret your earlier position or do you feel vindicated?
No, I hate to feel vindicated, but I do feel like, especially knowing what we know now, I can look back and say I still believe that was the correct position. We've seen with just how long things have gone on. I mean, people like to say, "Oh, well, he's got 60 days or he's got 90 days." Well, we've gone over that either way, no matter which day it is. No congressional approval. I'm a true limited government conservative, and so regardless of which way you believe, I think it is important to have the people's representatives having a say so in whether or not a nation goes from peace to war, especially if it's us taking that action. Obviously, if it's defensive action, that's a different story. But I think looking back, I still think that hey, the right move would have been to not pursue this in the way that we have.
Okay, so the things I remember about you is, you have an independent streak with you. You don't toe the company line. And we see that now this is almost became the party of Donald Trump. Are you concerned with your independent streak of not following the president? That's going to hurt you with Republican voters?
I mean, I think it's no doubt that that's something that an opponent would seek to exploit, especially if the campaign started to gain more traction. But I do think that the further along we get into the year, the further along we get into Trump's presidency. Look, I'm a Trump voter, but I'm someone that likes to call balls and strikes, and I think that there's a lot of people out there that I think do like to call balls and strikes. And so, while my opponent could seek to use that as a weakness, I think that that's something that would be an asset the further along that we go. So it's something that we've thought about, that we know is out there, but it's not something that we're necessarily worried about at all. We actually think it's going to be a strength.
Case, we've now hit a point where we're spending more money on interest on the debt than we are in defense, or that we're spending on Medicaid, as hard as that is to fathom. Is this something the next Congress needs to address? Or are we just kicking the can down the road for another 2, 4, 6, 8 years? What's the plan here?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we should have been addressed 10 years ago. We're seeing reports in which someone that's involved in it, this was no surprise to me, and I've already seen these studies, and I'm sure y'all have as well. But I saw over the weekend, I think the average voter was surprised. A study came out saying that Social Security is going to be insolvent by 2032. Well, folks that are paying attention, we all saw the writing on the wall, but the spending cannot continue at this pace. And it's something I highlighted actually over the weekend. I actually spoke to the Mid Alabama Republican Club. That was either last Saturday or the Saturday before. But spending is the real tax. And so while my opponent, Congressman Palmer, likes to go around and tout the big, beautiful bill and the tax cuts associated with that, which I was for, if you have tax cuts without spending cuts, you're not cutting anything. It's just delayed. And so it's a matter of whenever we increase spending and we're not actually addressing it, we're either paying for it now through inflation or through higher taxes later. So it's something that should have long been addressed. And so that's a key priority. If elected, that's going to be something I'm very hot and heavy on. Is even if, regardless of where I get put with committees or a lot of people like to say, well, if you're a freshman, you're not able to get as much accomplished. Any moment that I have, I will be talking about these issues because these are the issues that I'm passionate about and that I feel like the American people are concerned about is affordability. And so every opportunity I get, that's something I'm going to be speaking about because it should have been addressed long ago.
Hey, it's kind of along the same lines. You seem to know a lot about the budget and the spending. Is it fair to say that the problem is not the tax revenue that we're bringing in, it's what we're spending out?
Certainly. I mean, we saw during COVID, the spending just jumped like crazy and we've never come back down. And we were already spending, deficit spending then, but it's just gotten worse and been accelerated. And so I don't think it's the government's role to lay claim to people's money before they have claim to it. And so no matter which way you slice it, I think the spending is always the problem. It's never the revenue.
Case, is there, raising income taxes is obviously a non-starter for a lot of folks, especially on the Republican side. Is there an appetite for a national consumption tax where the Fed just takes 7-8% of every dollar that's spent on anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think that anyone should be open to looking at other possibilities and other ways to fund the government if you accompany that with lowering taxes or lowering spending. That in and of itself, added on to what we already have, that'd be a no-go for me. But if we're talking, I mean, it's the same way with the tariffs. I'm not a fan of the tariffs. I think it raises prices, or I know it raises prices on the importer, the American importer, and the consumer, because then it gets passed on to them. But it's the same thing that Senator Paul said. If you would show me an idea where we can actually abolish the income tax and fund the government with tariffs, well, now I might be on board with tariffs. So it's the same way with what you're speaking about now. I mean, I would not rule out a consumption tax if we're able to do other things to reduce the burden on the American people.
Okay, did we not fund the government with tariffs before the income tax?
Right, we did, certainly. And that's when the government was significantly, significantly smaller in size. And so if someone wants to float the idea of funding the government with tariffs and we're going to reduce the government down to the size it was at that time, I'm all for it.
Wouldn't one way to do this be to decrease the government's role in the economy? Maybe like farm out home student loans and mortgages and railroads with, through Amtrak and other things like that to the private sector and let the private sector, resolve these issues without Big Daddy government stepping in and, hey, we're going to do what we do and we don't care if we make money or not.
Right, certainly. Yeah, I think that's 100% spot on. I mean, the government's role should be as minimal as possible in every single scenario. And so I think you're 100% spot on there.
Thanks. I know you've attacked Palmer, and last time Garrett Wilkins attacked him for breaking his campaign pledge. And he's a career, and like I say, I think since he's a career politician. Why do you think that does not resonate with voters?
As far as calling him out as a career politician?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, when you call him a career politician, the guy's been up here, he broke his promise, and it's like voters don't care. Why do you think that? I mean, do people just not care about stuff like that anymore?
I feel like people do. I think it's a matter of getting the message out. And so I think that that's where both me and Mr. Wilkins have had challenges whenever you're going up against an incumbent, is getting the message out in front of the voters. I think we saw on the 19th that there is an appetite, especially in the greater Birmingham area, for anti-incumbents, for someone that's not a career politician. I mean, we saw Senator Dan Roberts lose his seat. We saw Representative Jim Carnes lose his seat. And so both of those were well-funded challengers, people that were able to get their message out. And so I think that that's the biggest hurdle, is getting in front of voters. I think, just take, for example, Jared Hudson. He was unsuccessful, but he made a lot of waves and ended up beating out Steve Marshall to get into the runoff. And so I certainly think that there is an appetite for that. It's just a matter of getting out in front of voters and becoming known to them, because obviously it's so difficult to overcome that incumbency name ID.
4 years ago, I think Kay Ivey trounced her Democrat challenger like 70-30 or something like that. This time we've got Doug Jones. He seems to have some momentum and a little bit more knowledge of how to campaign and where to raise money and that sort of deal. And I mean, Tommy Tuberville's been a little bit slow getting out the gate in, for his campaign. Are you concerned that for you or for other Republicans who might be on the November 3 ballot, that we might run into unprecedented amount of blue wave voters showing up at the polls trying to, unseat some of our Republican seats that we've just sort of taken for granted since 2010?
Right. Yeah, that's certainly something you can never rule out. You never want to take for granted. I don't think that's on the horizon. That's my personal opinion. But if you become complacent, then that will be on the horizon. And so, the way that Doug Jones, we all remember how he got elected in the first place, is next thing you know, there's all these allegations against Roy Moore. And a lot of folks that I knew at the time, they said, well, I just didn't go vote. But also, it's important to remember that that was a special election. And so I think with the standard November election coming up statewide, I'm not very concerned. I think there is going to be waves of Democrats. That's just natural whenever we've got a Republican-controlled White House, Senate, and Congress. There's going to be a lot more fire in the Democratic Party. I don't see it changing too much in the state of Alabama, but you can never get complacent, because next thing you know, it would happen if we did.
Okay, so are there any philosophical differences on issues between you and the congressman that really separate you, that you're like, this is wrong on something he believes in?
Certainly. I think that's our biggest difference, is that he believes that it's in the best interest to go along with leadership whenever push comes to shove. But that's how we've gotten $39 trillion in debt. That's how we've led to our liberties being eroded with FISA Section 702. That's how we led. I mean, it was a bipartisan bill back in 2021 under Speaker Pelosi, where Biden had the terrible Afghan withdrawal. And then next thing you know, there's a vote to bring more Afghan migrants over to the United States, as well as relaxing the vetting process associated with them coming over to our country. And Congressman Palmer voted for that, and it was a bipartisan. And so I think the running theme is that when leadership says, hey, we need you to be a team player, he's willing to toe the line. And I think that's where we differ, because if it's not in the best interest of the American people, I really couldn't care less what leadership says, because whenever we say America first, that's something I truly believe in.
Case, we've had, we are seeing like record beef prices. And of course, we've got the smallest beef cattle herd in like 70 years in this country. Now we've got the screwworm in, which is a blast from the past, suddenly in Texas, infecting cattle there. Does the federal government need to take a more active role in, one, protecting the herd of cattle we have, and maybe two, trying to get more young farmers into the ranching business, as a generation of baby boomers, who have really carried the weight for 50 years, are retiring from the business?
Yeah, I think 100%. And I think the way to do that is actually to make it easier to get into that industry, to repeal back red tape and make it more suitable for someone to actually make a living. And so two things that I would like to see: the Prime Act, which actually got put into the Farm Bill, but basically allowing you to sell locally with less regulation, without all that USDA garbage, the inspections and such like that at the slaughterhouse, being able to, as long as it doesn't cross interstate lines, sell to local mom and pop shops and local grocery stores and such like that. I think that's one thing that would make it easier. But then also too, the mandatory country of origin labeling. I think that a lot of people would be willing to buy American beef if it was known to them like, hey, this is American, this is Argentinian beef. If I'm at the grocery store, that's if I can afford it, that's certainly something that I'm looking for because I'd rather buy from my local farmer than I would buy from someone overseas. And so I think those two things together are things that would really help get more young farmers into the business because it would be a profitable business somewhere they could actually support their family and make a living. But B, if it became easier in that regard, then I think that we would start to see herd levels come up. Now that's going to take some time because, as you know, it's a trickle down effect, right? We're finally seeing the repercussions now from COVID, and so if things get better, it's not really going to get better until 4 or 5 years down the line. But I think those are two things that I would like to see, and I'm sure that with some research we could identify a lot of ways that the government's been getting in the way and making it harder for farmers to earn a living.
And back to Social Security, you mentioned being insolvent by 2032. I remember a couple years ago it was 2034, so it seems like it's running out of money quicker. Have you given any thought to how to salvage this and keep it from going under?
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate. It is. I think obviously you want to start with the low hanging fruit, and everybody likes to say this, and it's the easy thing to say, but it's true. You want to start with the waste, the fraud, the abuse. You want to start with what can I do to make it better with the least amount of change as possible, and then where the cards fall from there. Then I think you've got several other options. I do think the unfortunate thing is just as the baby boomers, such a large generation, as everyone knows, it's a pay-as-you-go system now. The folks that are working now are paying the current retirees, and there's a lot more current retirees than there are current workers. And so that's obviously why we're seeing it go insolvent. And so I think, unfortunately, we are going to need to see the retirement age gradually increased once again. Now, I would say, as a congressman, I would like to explore every other option before going down that route. But I think the writing's on the wall that that's where things are going to be. People are living longer. And then once again, when you go into the ratio of workers to retirees, that's just what I see as what is necessary in order to keep it going. Because if a politician stands in front of people and says, hey, you elect me, we're keeping it exactly the same. Everyone's getting their Social Security check. I'm not cutting anything, not raising the age of retirement. Nothing's going to happen, and everybody's going to be just fine. They're absolutely lying to you because by 2032, everyone's going to get a mandatory 22% cut. And so it's a matter of do you want to let people prepare or do you want them to get cut 22% overnight? I don't want to see people have a 22% cut to their Social Security check overnight. I'd rather people be able to see things on the horizon, be able to prepare, and actually be in a better financial place whenever we get to a time whenever Social Security has less money or potentially has less money. So I would say that if you compare someone like me that says, hey, we're going to need necessary structural changes to someone that says, no, we're not going to touch it and you'll be just fine, I would argue that I'm the only one trying to protect your Social Security, and the person that says I'm not touching it, they actually just don't care.
In 1969, we went to the moon and we planted our flag there. And I think we went like 3 or 4, maybe 5 more times after that. And then like 1973, yeah, we cut it the Apollo program because we couldn't afford to keep doing that. The cost was so high. Next year, we're going to land on the moon again to show, anybody under 50 that, yeah, we can actually do this and we have done this before, we can do this again. But are we looking at the same deal where we go and we plant the flag and we have 3 or 4 missions? And then because of the cost of the Space Launch System and the Artemis program, that Congress, especially when it starts to deal with the debt, just shelves, deep space exploration for another 4 or 5 decades.
Yeah, that's one thing that's not really been my forte is looking into space exploration. I like to leave that for other folks. There's a lot of people that are very interested in that. My personal opinion, I'm not sure what benefits there are to it other than just a pride thing, but I'm sure there are benefits that I'm not aware of. I'm sure there's a lot of scientific advancements that we can make from going out into space and doing more research, and who knows what we can come up with. But that's something I've not really focused a lot on. I try to focus on the tabletop issues as much as possible. But I'm sure there's some benefits, but it's just not something that I have really researched a ton.
And what is the biggest issue facing your district?
I would say affordability, but that's not unique to my district. That's across the country. But I think, we see these inflation numbers, 3%, 2%, whatever. Well, I think that whenever you look at your grocery bill and you add the same things back to your cart that you bought a year ago and it's doubled in price, we can certainly say that inflation's higher than whatever they're telling us. And so I think that's the number one issue facing the country, my district, my local community, you name it.
In a previous life, it seems for me, I was a health insurance agent. And so a lot of times, of course, now that, robocalls do all the calling. I used to call people that are about to turn 65 and, schedule an appointment to go out to their house. And I would tell them, and this was statistically true then, is statistically true now. For most of you, almost all of you, who've made the 65 deal, you will spend more money on health care after 65 than you have done in the previous 65 years of your life. And most of that will be in the last year and a half of your life. I don't want to be the one suggesting we need to just let grandpa die, but is there a humane way? I mean, I'm not for assisted suicide, but to go in and tell the doctors and the hospitals, hey, the likelihood of this liver transplant on the 83-year-old probably not going to work. We maybe, the little bit of extra life you're going to get him is not worth the cost and the pain and suffering you're putting him through in the treatment. And how would government even do something like that?
Yeah, I think the way I look at things, my focus on healthcare is going to be more the role of the government. I think that that might be more of the role of the private citizen and their doctor and their families and deciding what's best. I think the key to what you're saying there to kind of tie it together is if taxpayers are on the hook,
I
then
mean, once you turn 65, it's pretty much the taxpayer is on the hook
right,
for,
right.
the hospital and 80% of everything else.
Right, right. Well, that's where I was headed. I mean, once the taxpayers are on the hook, that's when everyone else becomes interested in it and why it involves everyone else. And so I think the key is to actually reducing the prices associated to where then it is more of just a personal decision. It's not really affecting all these other people. And so, I think there's several ideas out there to reduce healthcare costs. But it's to your point earlier. I think the more we can remove the government the better because everything the government touches gets more expensive, whether it's college, whether it's healthcare, whether it's housing. I mean, just take, for example, the housing bill that just passed. I'm sure you guys have taken a look at it a little bit. There's some good things in there, some things that cut back regulation, and then there's some bad things in there, some things that increase the size and scope of the government and its role involved in housing. And so I think that many times we've seen that anytime the government starts subsidizing or having a program that makes something easier for someone to obtain, well, next thing you know, the demand goes up. And when the demand goes up, the prices go up. And it just creates this never ending cycle. And so Senator Tuberville caught a little heat for voting against that bill. But I'm 100% in support with Senator Tuberville because for too long, and my opponent voted for that bill. Why? Because leadership told him to. And it was a bipartisan bill. And so, just like with healthcare, just like with housing, for too long, government thinks, hey, I created a problem. Now I'm going to fix said problem. Whereas the government just needs to get out of the way, reduce their regulations. And in regards to healthcare specifically, I mean, we need price transparency. We need health savings accounts access. We need people to be able to sell insurance across state lines. I mean, you name it. There's so many things that we can do to actually reduce the role of the government in healthcare. And I think it has a carryover effect to everyone, in regardless of their stage of life or whether they're on Medicare or not.
It's back to affordability. Have you given any thoughts about how we can reduce inflation or at least stop it from continuing to rise?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is reducing government spending and actually having the spine to say no. And I think that's what you would be getting with me opposed to my opponent is someone that is actually willing to say no. And that's where it starts. Because again, whenever you have deficit spending, you're just paying for it later through higher taxes or inflation today because the Fed is just going to print money to cover all of their obligations. And so I think that's the number one way to bring down and actually have prices or inflation cool is allow the free market to work, get the government out of the way, reduce government spending, and I think things will eventually level out.
Whatever your view of the Iran war, when the Iranians closed the Straits of Hormuz, the president and administration looked to our European NATO allies to, help us out, send some frigates, maybe some submarines, some aircraft to, beef up our forces, in keeping the straits open or whatnot. And he pretty much either got insulted or heard crickets. Are we at a point in our alliances where we're just going to have to assume, yeah, if we do something or if we're helping out Israel or something, we're probably at this alone?
Yeah, certainly. I think that's just a prime example of why we need to get out of NATO. I don't think it works to our benefit. I think that we're just subsidizing these other countries. Whenever things come down to it, they're not actually willing to help. Now, in that prime example, I mean, we were, some would argue, the aggressor, and so you can understand their reservations of getting involved there. But regardless, I mean, whenever we're fronting most of the money and we're covering everyone else's defense, and other countries are not actually meeting their threshold of percentage to their GDP of what they're actually paying in to their defense spending, I mean, it's long past due that we get out of NATO. That doesn't mean that we don't have any alliances, but I think that means that we don't have any standing permanent alliances, because too many times we see that it may not be in the best interest of the U.S. And so I think it's important that we take each alliance on a case by case basis, and then I think that would work out better for the United States.
And do you think this operation in Iran was a success, or did Iran come out stronger after this?
I'm not sure if they came out stronger, but I certainly wouldn't categorize it as a success. It's yet to be determined whatever is going to be hammered out with Vice President Vance in Switzerland. But as it's looking right now, it looks like we might just be trying to get back to the status quo of where things were beforehand, with maybe both of our countries' munitions significantly depleted. But other than that, to me, it looks like we're almost moving back to where we were pre-war. And so in that regard, I would not categorize it as a success, no.
It sort of got overshadowed by Iran, but over the weekend, our Ukrainian allies bombed targets in Moscow and on the outskirts of St. Petersburg, deep inside Russia. I know originally the Biden administration was reticent to provide them with long-range weaponry. Apparently, either through us or our European allies, somebody has changed the position on that. Are we really playing with fire in Ukraine, or do we need to put more pressure on Russia to get a deal? Are we scared that this thing really could still blow up?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see us work diplomatic channels and try to get these people back to the negotiating table, which we saw at the beginning of Trump's presidency. Obviously, things fizzled out. It doesn't look like President Zelensky is sometimes at a place where he actually wants a deal. I think that many times he's emboldened because he thinks he has the support of the U.S., and so he acts irrationally in a way that he maybe wouldn't do otherwise if he realized, hey, I'm more or less on my own, which is what he should be viewing, instead of thinking, no, I've got the backing of the big guys behind me, I'm going to act out of character. That's certainly not what you want to see. And so, but also we want to make sure that we don't, and that's why I said diplomatic channels, because we don't want to get roped into a never-ending war with Russia and Ukraine. And so this has already been going on for so long, and it's, I'm not sure there's an end in sight right now.
Okay, so back to, you mentioned we should get out of NATO, and I've heard, many politicians express that. In fact, Alabama Governor George Wallace brought it up in 1968. Do you think that there is any real purpose for the UN now, and should we get out of that?
Oh yeah, I mean that one's the easiest no-brainer. I mean, a lot of times they're pushing agendas on the US that it's really contrary to our values, contrary sometimes to our Constitution. And so we shouldn't have these just pseudo global agencies trying to push their agenda on the United States. So we should certainly get out of the UN, and we should also get out of NATO.
On the last day she was on the job as National Intelligence Director, Tulsi Gabbard released documents showing that, yes, Anthony Fauci did attempt to cover up, information about the lab in Wuhan and our involvement with it. And in U.S. intelligence agencies, not all of them, but some of them participated in that cover up with Dr. Fauci and CDC and NIH. What sort of grand conspiracy with the Chinese and intel are they protecting that we don't need that somebody thinks we don't need to know about?
Yeah, I mean, we're getting off into the weeds there. I wouldn't claim to know, but what I think that we can see is that taxpayer dollars were used to fund gain of function research, and Fauci lied about it to Congress. And so that in and of itself is enough that Fauci needs to come answer before Congress, and he needs to be brought to justice because there's been no accountability for the things that have happened surrounding COVID, the businesses that were lost, the family members that didn't get to be with their loved ones on their deathbeds. I mean, we could go down the list. And so then we had the preemptive pardon by Biden, which actually ended up being an auto pen. And so it's just a big mess. And so I know Senator Paul is leading the effort to bring Fauci in, which he actually was going to have Fauci come in and testify. And then Fauci backed out. He was supposed to testify, I think, at the end of this month. And so once he backed out, then Senator Paul has subpoenaed Anthony Fauci. So we'll see how things play out there. But if I was in Congress, I would be also one of the folks leading that effort to get answers because to your point about what's going on, what's the conspiracy, I don't know. And there's a lot of people that don't know. But what we do know is that we should know more. And so we need to talk to the people that would know more and the people that were clearly trying to cover things up.
And talking about getting us out of the UN and NATO, we have a global economy, and now a lot of people are intertwined. Our economies are intertwined. Would you consider yourself an isolationist, or at least a limited isolationist?
No, I would just consider myself someone that likes to take things case by case. I do think it's good that whenever we do business overseas, I wouldn't say that we want to cut off our economy to the global economy. I think that brings prices down. It's the ultimate capitalism, right? Competition drives prices down. And so I think a lot of times if we are shutting down our borders and we think not in the sense of immigration, obviously we should shut down our borders there, but if we're shutting down our borders to commerce, then we're going to see prices go up and there's going to be less competition and it's going to hurt the American people. And so I would just say, and it's similar to what I said in regards to our foreign policy. It's not that we shouldn't be involved or that we shouldn't have some alliances here and there, but it needs to be short, limited, and with a very strategic advantage. And so it's similar to a lot of these laws that Congress passes where they sunset. Well, why do they sunset? Because things need to be reevaluated every so often to make sure that this is still the right move. And so that's the same way that I view alliances. That's the same way I view commerce. I mean, across the board, things should be in short duration and should have checks and balances regarding it.
Case, we went through like 20 or 30 years where we were preached at by our government that we need to conserve energy, that we need to, raise our thermostats, lower our thermostats in winter and raise our thermostats in the summer months, and that we might want to go to electric cars and put solar panels on our house. And now we've reached the future, and instead of conserving power, we're on some kind of massive deal to build data centers all over the country so that AI can eliminate as many jobs as humanly possible so we could get an edge up efficiency wise and technologically on the Chinese. Were we sold a real bad bill of goods here by our government and their grand planning schemes?
Yeah, I mean, I was just asking myself the other day, where did all the climate change folks go? And all of a sudden they've left the chat and they're not concerned anymore. And so I think that with the data centers, what I would like to see is the federal government get out of the way and allow states and local municipalities to do what's best for their communities. As a true free market capitalist, if you've got a large portion of land that you yourself want to sell to someone that may or may not put a data center there, I think that's up to the individual. But also, too, I think that true environmental processes have to take place to make sure that there's not going to be actual adverse effects to the wildlife, to surrounding nature, things of that nature. But whenever you see the government stepping in, putting their thumb on the scale and saying, hey, we're going to facilitate this sale, or we're going to give you a tax abatement, or we're going to let you fast track past all the environmental research that typically we wouldn't let Joe Schmo fast track. We would make him go through all this rigorous testing and such. When the government's putting their thumb on the scale in that regard, I don't like to see it. I don't like to see distorted markets. It doesn't matter what it is. And so that's how I view the data centers. I think that we should hold them to the same standard as we would hold everyone else. And I think that we would truly see it work out best whenever local communities have the ultimate say so in what happens as far as the zoning. I mean, you name it.
And so recently we've seen Elon Musk become the world's first trillionaire, and of course we hear people yelling, tax the wealthy, and I'm not going to get into the stats, but I mean the wealthy pay most of the taxes. But I mean I hear him saying tax the millionaires, billionaires, but I think the top bracket's like 500,000 or something like that. Should we look at raising an income bracket for people that make more? If getting taxed at $1 million or taxed at $1 billion, or should they
Certainly
stay at
not.
those?
Certainly not. I mean, we need to see taxes come down across the board. I don't care whether you're a trillionaire, billionaire, millionaire, 100,000aire, doesn't matter. Make a minimum wage. I mean, I want to see lower taxes across the board because, to your point, I mean, everybody likes to complain about him being the first trillionaire, but what they're going to overlook is all the jobs that he's creating. And so,
Right.
I mean, I think that we've seen we all know in this interview that whenever you got folks that are able to have lower taxes, they're able to do more, and it's able to benefit everyone, whether it's jobs, economy, doesn't matter, you name it. It improves lives and it catapults us forward in regards to advancements. And so I certainly don't think we need to see any taxes being raised.
Case, we've had you on for about 45 minutes now. I mean, we can keep going all day, but is there something you'd like to say that we really haven't covered in this last nearly an hour?
Yeah, I mean, I think that just in general, I think that going back to what I said about FISA and our liberties being eroded or just towing the leadership line, we touched on it a good portion. And so I wouldn't say it's something that we haven't touched on. But speaking to your listeners, I would just say you want someone that tells you the truth and that truly puts America first. And I think part of that is going to be nonpartisan issues, such as banning congressional stock trading, actually pushing for term limits instead of just saying it to get elected. I mean, things of that nature. And so if you want someone that's truly going to shoot you straight, then I'm your guy. And it's just like Representative Tim Burchett. He put out a video today, a little selfie video he posted to X, speaking about the housing bill and how it was really just a Trojan horse. You're never seeing Congressman Palmer do those sorts of things. He just votes the way leadership says and tries to go on about his business. And if somebody questions him about it, he'll say, well, there was a pay raise for soldiers in that bill. Well, leadership's always going to put something good in a bad bill so you can have an out to give a reason to your voters about why you voted for it. And so I'm going to be the person that's actually willing to have a spine, say no when it's the right thing, and then explain my votes to voters so that there's no question.
Hey, thanks so much for talking to us, and good luck on August 11th.
Appreciate y'all. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.